Hello there everyone, and welcome back to the channel. It's been a little while, and those perceptive among you may recognize that this is not Phantasy Star II, the game that I'm currently supposed to be making a playthrough of. Simply put, I've had a bit of a falling out with the game, with Phantasy Star II. I find it really dull and boring and tedious, and while I am pig-headed and stubborn enough to continue playing it, I just need a little break to make a video summarizing all of the many myriad reasons that I feel that the game has wronged me. In the meantime, I'm just going to progress with my ever-lengthening and growing backlog and just move on to the next one on it in chronological order, that being the even more infamously awful Castlevania the Adventure. This game is not supposed to be very good, but in the interest of playing through that entire backlog, I'm going to be going ahead with it anyway. Now, what is Castlevania the Adventure? I hear some of you asking, on account of the fact that it perhaps isn't quite as well known as some of those other Castlevania titles. And the simple answer is, it is a version of Castlevania for the Game Boy. It's a very early Game Boy title. The Game Boy is hardly known for creating really powerful games or anything, but this is kind of another level of primitive. You play as Christopher Belmont. The Belmont, I believe he's the grandfather of Simon, who, at this point in the timeline, would have been the only Belmont that anyone was familiar with. So, Simon, I believe, is in the 1600s. Christopher here is roughly in the 1500s, and then Trevor from Castlevania 3 is from the 1400s, to be kind of broad ranges there. So we're playing a little bit earlier in the timeline than people would have been familiar with at this point. You know, only being familiar with Simon and his adventures in Castlevania 1 and 2. So we're a little bit earlier than we were there. But this is it's a Game Boy title. It's a very much downgraded version of the Castlevania that we all know and debatably love. You know, I know that the Classicvania titles are maybe a little bit controversial. I enjoyed Castlevania 2. Castlevania 1, I enjoyed up until we got kind of to those final few levels. Those were tedious. But this is very much a different kind of game to those. It's infamous, I would argue, primarily because of just how slow it is. The Belmonts have never been a particularly agile set of monster hunters, but Castlevania the Adventure really takes that to another level. Like, Christopher moves like he's got weights in his shoes. It's kinda ridiculous. I mean, it's lucky that the enemies, similarly, are very, very slow, but even so, it's quite painful. I have practiced a little bit with the game. It's only 4 levels long, so even if it's not the best game out there, it's mercifully not very long. We shouldn't be here for too long, even if it's, very slow. I have practiced a little bit, just this first level, and I can say there are a lot of problems. It's not just the fact that you are slow. There are a lot of problems beyond that. Beyond the lack of interesting enemies, beyond all the rest of it. There are a lot of problems here. Hopefully, I can kind of illuminate some of them as we progress. But, to be fair to it, there are a lot of kind of the classic Castlevania tropes did remain intact. You know, you're still going around breaking candles, you're still got some of that basic Belmont movement going around. You're still fighting a lot of the same kind of enemies. you know, it's not completely removed from those kind of much more famous Classicvania titles, and frankly, better Classicvania titles. There is still some of that DNA there. Obviously, significantly changed to account for the fact that this is having to run on the Game Boy, a very, very weak console, and especially because it's one of the first Game Boy games, it's even more kinda using new technology, kinda breaking new ground, for better or for worse. This is a bit of a tricky bit of platforming. Hopefully it goes well for us. The game has a nasty habit of really making a lot of the platforming kinda the very edge of your movement. A bat should be spawning around here. They're very nasty. Now, this section is kind of infamous, I believe, but I think I have figured out a broad way to get through it pretty easily. This bat here that spawns, because enemies respawn every time you kind of get to a certain trigger in the level. Now, I can't quite comment on it as I'm doing it, but if you kind of watch the playthrough again, you'll note that every time I'm jumping as there's a certain frame of Christopher's animation that I'm jumping on, if you kind of watch back. What I'm doing is I'm kind of keeping my rhythm up by every time that Christopher changes his walking animation so that both of his feet are together. That frame, if you kind of slow it down, that one there. Jump on that frame, or as soon as that kind of appears, and with the exception of that single jump there, which I think is slightly longer, so you do need to delay it a little bit further, that should put you in pretty good stead. The game suffers from a lot of slowdown, as you can see, which does make some of these jumps quite a bit more difficult than it should be. A lot of things in this game are a lot more difficult than it should be because of that slowdown, unfortunately. And it's really coming to a head there. I don't know why it's so bad. Maybe it's because I've turned on the colour settings or something. But with that, we come to the first boss of Castlevania II. This is... I don't actually know his name. I probably should have gone and researched that before we began. But yes, this is the first boss of the game. It's this strange suit of armour, kinda shooting out with a spear here. He is a little bit tough, especially because the game has a nasty habit of ignoring your inputs in this fight. But so long as you keep your distance, he's not too bad. And frankly, that went very well. That's, you know, that practice before we started definitely paid off. I'm usually not doing anywhere near that well in that level, so I'm certainly not going to complain about that. But yeah, that'll be it for today's episode. You know, maybe it's not quite as bad, at least at this early stage, as people make it out to be, but even so, there's only so much Castlevania the Advance I can handle at once. So I'm going to leave it there for now. In the next episode, we're going to move on to the next level of the game. I believe it's some sort of underground crypt. I believe levels 3 and 4 are in Castlevania Dracula's Castle proper. But I believe next episode is in a set of crypts. So yeah, that's for next time. So tune in tomorrow if you want to see more Castlevania the Adventure. But for now, I thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Tune in next time. And adios and ciao.